So last time we talked, in our last discussion, we talked about premarital counseling, and we touched on some, we mentioned silent treatment as a form of emotional abuse, which for many people might not think about it as abuse, because whenever we mention domestic abuse, the first thing I think we think about is like throwing bottles or beating
Punching,
someone,
yeah.
which is the obvious form of domestic abuse. But there are other things like the silent treatment, which nobody thinks about. And from my experience, I think some people go through living in an abusive relationship without even knowing its relationship. Can you tell me from your experience what kind of things that people don't see as emotional abuse or whatever kind of abuse?
You know, first of all, this area is a very sensitive area, you know, and for those of our viewers that are watching, we encourage that if at some point you feel like even pausing it is okay, and to acknowledge that there are millions of people out there that are going through all type of abuse, and it is totally unacceptable. And you know, we just wanted to
absolutely. Yes, I think it's very important that people know we're talking about, you know, domestic violence, domestic abuse, because people could be triggered by what we're talking about. So if anybody is triggered, then, you know, our suggestion is call somebody, you know, or switch it off, or, you know, call a therapist, call Elpizo. You know, we'll be here to support you. But yes, it's very important. But domestic violence it's such a big thing, and like you said, not everybody knows what it is. They could be living with it without realizing, actually, I'm in an abusive relationship. And what does it look like? Well, it can look like me being beaten, me being punched, me being kicked, to the silent treatment. You know, Gottman talks about the 4 horsemen, and one of them is stonewalling, which is silent treatment, and that is a precursor to divorce. And it's interesting that a lot of men tend to use silence without realizing that it's abusive. Men use silence because oftentimes they say, well, you know, I don't want to get into an argument, or I'm too upset, I don't want to say anything to hurt somebody, so I'm just going to be silent. And it's okay if you communicate it. It is not an abuse. It is not a form of abuse if you say to your spouse, you know, I'm heated, or I'm angry, I'm upset right now. I'm going to go for a walk for half an hour, and then I'm going to come back, and then we can continue the conversation. Or, you know what, I need to take a break. Give me 10 minutes. Because you've communicated it.
Exactly.
So therefore, it is not abusive.
You are not leaving them.
You're not leaving them wandering. And so when you, the key thing is actually to come back to the table and continue that conversation. But when that silence becomes an hour, becomes half a day, becomes a full day, 2 days, 3 days, it becomes abusive, you know.
You see, and also for domestic violence, it comes in so many different facets. We have the financial abuse that comes in with it, spiritual abuse that comes in, intellectual abuse, emotional abuse, all type of abuse that comes in it. And sometimes it is easier said than done also, that people will say, why don't you get out? Why don't you get out of the relationship? When you are a victim, it is so difficult to come out. It is so difficult. And sometimes people will say, don't you see what is happening? You know, victims, they need a lot of support and help.
You know,
and the perpetrators too also need a lot of support and help. Because sometimes most times look at the victims and we leave the perpetrators. But unless they get help, they will continue to do whatever that they're doing. And for the victims to, whatever that they are going through, it is not their fault.
Yeah.
You know, it is not their fault. They are hurt, they are broken, they are stuck in it, maybe sometimes because of their children, that if I leave, what about the kids? They will go through broken homes. Or I leave, I don't have money to look after them, I will be homeless. So a whole range of, issues comes up. But if you are a victim, know that you are not alone. There are plenty of help out there.
Yeah, I just want to go back because I like the question that you asked, that what can people look out for, because they could be in an abusive relationship and not realize that they are
in
so
abusive.
some of the things that could be happening could be being restricted from family, being told that you can't go and see your family members, don't talk to your family members
Or your friends.
or your friends, being ostracized from the outside world. You can only stay at home, you can only go out if I accompany you, if I go with you, if I give you permission to go. Some things to look out for could be money, for example. When I'm not allowed to spend money. If I'm working, you're working, but my money comes, I'm being told, okay, bring your paycheck. I'm the head of the home, or even vice versa. I will look after the money. And so I don't have access. Every time I need something, I have to go to my spouse to ask. That is a form of abuse. Being insulted, being ridiculed in public,
and belittled.
being belittling somebody, that is abuse. Being compared to, oh, look at that woman, or look at that man, look how good they look, they put themselves well together. That is a form of abuse. And people think that, oh, really, is that abuse? Yes, it is. Why are you being compared to somebody else? Why? You don't know what that person is doing.
Yeah.
You don't know. So why are you saying such and such? Do you want to be with that person? So that is some kind of abuse. Or being told what to do and not what to do, what to cook, what not to cook. Anything that is controlling is a form of domestic
all these
abuse.
examples you mentioned, it's basically putting one above the other.
Yes.
And it's not like equal.
It's not equal.
It's not
Because when you feel uncomfortable in a situation, that you feel that you're being manipulated or you're being controlled, that is a form of abuse. Because at the end of the day, when you define abuse is, is abuse of power, isn't it? It's me having a strength or a power over you to control you, and you don't have a say.
And that brings a lot of trauma that sometimes people don't look into it. Say for an example, if someone is constantly beaten at home, it causes trauma and also PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. That sometimes flashback comes in, and they even watching the movie and they see someone yelling, screaming, it triggers them. They cannot sleep, and it triggers a whole lot of stuff for them. And if children are involved, it is, and kids are in their room, hears dad or mom yelling and shouting and breaking things and fighting. They hide in there, and sometimes
hiding under the bed. They're also experiencing trauma. They're experiencing second degree trauma. So it's not only the spouse that is being abused, but the children are also being abused. And I think, obviously, you were alluding to the fact earlier on about why people stay. It's really sad that sometimes people, you hear the question, but why didn't they leave? It's not very simple to leave.
Pack up and
I
leave.
remember one time, just a client basically was clearly in a very abusive relationship, and I just asked and they were not acknowledging that. They can't see it because they're so trapped in a sense. And I just asked them, if a friend came to you and said all these things, what would you tell them? And the kind just started crying and crying, and they realized that it's
You see, and one area that we so passionate about is when it comes to religious people like Christians. We often will tell people, victims, go back home. You know, the man could be the victim, the woman could be the victim. Or
I think
children,
it's important that we make that point, because a lot of people think that
because
domestic violence is usually male to female. But we don't talk about the female to male side.
You know, it happens a lot. So, say for example, you go to church and you discuss it with your pastor or your priest. They say, well, you know, God hates divorce. So what we will do is that, you know, pray for you, but you have to go back home. Or sometimes you pack up and you go home. Your parents will say that,
go back home.
Go back to your wife or go back to your husband. And sometimes we are not acknowledging the dangers in there. That is always important that when we notice that someone is going through any form of abuse, we put safety in place. That is number one. Make sure the person is safe. Because we've had instances whereby people were encouraged and they prayed for them, they went back home, that was the end of them, you know, they got killed. And you know, and sometimes people are living with guilt, saying that had I known, I should have kept my, you know, friend or my family member at home, and I encourage them to go back, you know, home. So if someone is a victim, you know, maybe listening to our, you know, discussion, it's always important to seek help. You are not alone. You feel you are in danger, call the police. Call police. I know that in some countries, even if you call the police, in some cultures, they say, what are you calling the police for? But where, you know, we have systems, or maybe the law and order is really high level, like in this part of the world, you know, the police are well trained, whereby they put safety first.
And the thing as well is that you as a person in an abusive relationship, if you find yourself in that situation, you need to prepare. Sometimes, like we've already said, they can't, or they feel unable to leave, but their lives are in danger, their children are in danger, so they need to be able to, you know, perhaps pack some things, keep it with a neighbor, because sometimes, you know, the people that are in the abusive relationship, they're being watched by the abuser, by the perpetrator. They have no room for movements. But when they get the opportunity, it is important that they import documents such as passport, health card, or driving license. They need to make copies and, you know, find a safe place to keep it. They need to have copies of keys made and left with a neighbor. There needs to be, you know, even with the children, some kind of escape plan that you can discuss with your children, and when the time is right, be able to leave and go to shelter, or like Elvis said, go to the police, where you will be protected, you will be looked after. Because sometimes women or people think that there is no safety out there, but it's important that at least these little key things, these tips about, you know, safety planning, knowing or having even some kind of a code word when you're talking with neighbors that you can say, so the neighbor realizes that you're in a situation that you need help. You know, and also for the children, having some kind of code word, being ready, and putting things in the trunk, putting food away, or packing, you know, dry food and things like that, so that when you do make that move, you're not leaving just with the clothes on your back, but you'll leave with a little bit of something to last you for at least a couple of days while they find shelter for you, or a family friend to stay with.
And also it's very important that for family and friends, if someone is a victim, we should know how to be there for them by not, giving them, telling them what to do, or, giving them solutions or rescuing them. The best you can do is to listen, because they are really hurt, and some of them are not able to leave themselves vulnerable to really express it because of the guilt or the shame around, and how sometimes people stigmatize it. And sometimes some people say, you were well educated and you have this brilliant profession, why are you a victim?
Or even they say, that people don't believe very often because of who you're married to. You could be married to a prominent, or married to a prominent member of the community. So oftentimes, friends and family don't really help the situation a lot when they say, "What are you talking about? You're being looked after," and so that is part of the controlling. When the spouse is giving you money, they beat you and they give you money. They take you on expensive holidays. They buy you expensive gifts just to keep you there, to have that portrayal of that everything is okay.
I think that's the worst situation, because they are doing some things right, but there's like 20% of abuse, so it's even more difficult. It's not like
it's deceptive, right? It's a camouflage.
It goes in an ongoing cycle. They hurt you, they apologize, they buy you flowers or they buy you gifts. It's my last time. Oh, baby, I'm so sorry. Next month or next day, they are back on it again, and it goes. So once you see
what we call the abuse cycle, where it starts off with the abuse, and then there's reconciliation, and then there's gifts, and then it starts little again, and then it gets backwards, and it just goes round and round.
And these people need help. And sometimes in some domestic violence too, we also tell the victims that sometimes too mental issues can also bring that also, that sometimes people that are delusional or have the bipolar too, they will snap or something will happen, and sometimes some of them will hear voices, beat the person or kill the person. They won't need help. And sometimes when maybe someone have got mental illness, even going for help, the stigmatization, the shame, the community, the culture they are in, they don't want to go for help. So sometimes we are all part of the problem and solution at the same time. So that's why we are creating the awareness. People have been talking about it. Plenty of awareness are out there, education are out there, but we will not stop talking about it. That once you know the red flags coming, controlling, not allowed to be doing things, connecting with people, your phone is there, they're always constantly checking in your phone, controlling, you did this, they need explanation. You feel like you are walking on eggshells all the time. These are all,
indicators of
or red flags that we have to be very much aware of.
I just have one last question. If someone is wondering, like, they are not sure whether they are in an abusive relationship or not, and they end up coming to counseling here, do you make any decisions for them? Do you like call the police, or like, because sometimes people might be afraid to come to counseling because they don't know what are the consequences. So what can you tell them?
Well, that's a good question. It is. We tell them, come here, because you'll be safe. We are not going to be reporting on anybody's behalf, especially if they're adults. Because even if I call the police will say, well, where's the person in question, right? They have to make that reporting themselves. But by coming here, the one thing that we don't do is we will not see a couple that are in an abusive relationship together. So if one of them is the abuser, we will not see them together, because what that will do is it will create even more problems. We don't know between here and driving home, or between here and home, or by the time they get home, the one person is angry, the spouse, the abuser is angry. Why did you go and say such and such at counseling? Why did you? Now you've disgraced me. Look what you've done. And the abuse will get worse. Could get worse. Could get even fatal. So that's the one thing we don't do. But we do support. We'll give the person education. They will make up their own decision. It is not for us to tell you what to do, but sometimes people need to know, they have the knowledge, and know that there is support, because there's a lot of support in the community, and we will give them suggestions and resources, and at the end of the day, they make their own decision.
And the question too that you also asked, another part of it is, before we start therapy, we go through the consent for treatment, whereby we highlight the confidentiality aspect of it. So the only time we break confidentiality is when maybe you are a danger to yourself or to the public, or maybe kids or elderly vulnerable are involved in it. Then we are mandated to report it. And also, if say for an example, you say you want to go and blow the gas station, it's a cry for help. Or if we are subpoenaed by court, then we would have to disclose confidentiality. So if a couple comes in, for example, and we go through the consent for treatment and they sign up to it, like Ruth said, we will split them up, whereby the male will work with the male or female or whatever that they would prefer. If they disclose that kids have been witnessing domestic violence,
or kids are being abused in that relationship, that we have to report.
We have to report that, because for our code of ethics, we are mandated to report those cases.
Okay. One last question. This is a very dark topic, very sad topic. What do you, from your experience, is there hope for such couples? Is there hope for people who have gone through all of that and they've gone to counseling?
You see, the question comes in two ways. It's all about the client, if they want to make real change. If you have two clients, say for an example, and one of them comes and say, I don't want to go to jail, so because of that, I've come for counseling to deal with my anger issues. And the other person comes and say, I've realized how I've really hurt my family and friends, and because I don't want to hurt them, I've come to really do this for me, to go through changes. I mean, which of the two do you think will likely go through therapeutic healing? The second one. So it's about letting clients know that even though sometimes they are mandated to come, or because of an issue they don't want to get a criminal record, so because of that they come back, to really let them know that look at it from a different perspective. Why don't you put on your oxygen mask and do this for you, so that you can be very much aware? And where help is, we know in the past people have really benefited coming for session, because they were able to get different perspective and change their systemic lens to look at it from a different frame of reference. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to say yes, there is hope. There is hope for anybody that chooses to come to therapy, to get help, and to participate in the healing for themselves. Even the person who's abusive can get help and can recover. Can couples who are in an abusive relationship heal and get back together? Absolutely. If both are committed, like Elvis said, if I can acknowledge that, you know what I'm doing to my family is hurtful. I don't know why I'm doing it. Maybe I have an illness, a problem. Maybe in my past this was done to me, but I want to stop. Then there is help. So my simple, straightforward answer is yes, there is hope.
Okay. Thank you so much.